And good morning to everyone, and a very warm welcome to the Eastern Cape webinar. I must say, this morning I woke up and it was one of those moments where I really miss our normal lives, where we travel around the country, going to have various provinces and regions to be with our committees and our members in the area. And I woke up this morning and I thought, gosh, to have been in the Eastern Cape, in Port Elizabeth or East London this morning would have been absolutely wonderful. So during the morning, I'm just going to pretend that that is where we are. And I'm sure many of you who are attending this morning, I see that we not only have Eastern Cape delegates, we've got delegates from all over South Africa and also from Namibia and Zimbabwe and elsewhere. So just a huge welcome to all of you. A topic very relevant. Obviously, being an Eastern Cape webinar, meaning that our Eastern Cape committee in the region have driven this event. So well done to the committee, a committee that started close to the end of last year and has just been so dynamic and fantastic and truly a wonderful representation of how UMSA members work and the energy and the impact that they bring to the Institute. So thank you very, very much for this morning. Such a relevant topic, Eastern Cape Committee, something that we really need to talk about at the moment. I think in terms of cybersecurity and data protection, I think we all know, we're all feeling it, is that we are living in such a digital world at the moment. We've got folk working from home, working remotely, the way that we are digitalizing everything's virtual. So our landscape has truly changed and evolved. And so our risk landscape has most certainly done so as well. And so what do we need to do? What do we need to be aware of? And how do we place controls in place to make sure that we are really keeping a strong hold on our organizations? Because it's really crucial right now. What are we doing? So I cannot wait to hear from our three speakers this morning. We've got Guy Rich from GMR Strategic Management. We've got Junaid Amra from PwC, and then Craig Rosewarne from Wolfpack. So thank you to those three speakers. It's really going to be an interesting topic, and I think we're all just really, as I said, looking forward to hearing what are you finding in this space at the moment, especially with your clients, with the various organizations, and what do we need to do? Because I think it's just going to keep changing, it's moving. Even from an UMSA point of view, we're just seeing so many different things, and from a cyber risk point of view, we're also seeing such a shift and having to be aware and upskill and so on. So I really hope the UMSA team are here today to listen and also learn, because, and I see that you are, okay, fantastic. Just some little hands up from my team, and just seeing that we are ready as well, because it's going to impact us all, and it is impacting us all. So before we get going with this wonderful session, just a reminder on a few activities from UMSA and what's coming up. Yesterday, I had one of the most exciting days. We planned the conference. Well, we've been planning the conference since last year, but we planned the conference program yesterday. And you'll see a call for proposals going out, and please send through based on one of the topics. But we actually scheduled the entire program, and I looked at this program and I just thought, wow, this is going to be such an impactful conference at the end of September. Really something to look forward to, because the topics are so relevant to this landscape, and what we all need to do to upskill, uplift, and just be so present in our roles as risk professionals, risk leaders within our organizations, and risk champions. So please keep a lookout for that and register, get in with your early birds as soon as they open the registration, which will be very, very soon. Please make sure that you're in there, because this year is going to be incredibly special. So it's something I'm really looking forward to. And then, of course, the awards. We were also speaking about the awards this year. We'll be opening the award nominations, the Risk Management Award nominations that we hold annually. And it's also going to come with a very different sort of event this year. But the purpose of those awards and recognizing the talent and the brilliant risk professionals that we've got out there in the organizations that did phenomenal work during an exceptionally difficult year in 2020. So looking forward to seeing who comes out at the top, because I think there are many organizations and risk professionals that can most certainly show off and share with us in terms of what they did during last year, because I think there are many, many lessons out there that we can learn from. So I'm looking forward to that. And then, of course, all of you sitting there in terms of your personal space, what is next for you? How do you step up? You would have seen already, I mean, it's been really out there. The theme for this year from IMSA is step up. Now is the time, now is your chance, now is your organization's time to step up for you as professionals, organizations, champions, etc. So stepping up, looking at the board exams for this year, do you have the designations, the Certified Risk Management Practitioner and the Certified Risk Management Professional designations that are registered for SAQA? And if not, why not? And if not, is this not the time to look at it for this year to upskill? Because I think it's going to be crucial to ensure that you've got those designations, because, we saw, and I don't know if you all know, but last year, in a time where we had raised a flag at the beginning of the whole lockdown, one of the flags that we raised was, would membership decline during a COVID period? And that was a huge concern. Obviously, we're an institute, we're a not-for-profit, and so that is one of our biggest risks, is that our membership would decline. And I need to tell you is that our membership, individual membership, pretty much remained constant, which is unbelievable, especially compared to other professional bodies under there where they saw a terrible drop in retention. So that was unbelievable. But the thing that was really, really surprising and delightful and satisfying and fantastic was we saw that our corporate membership grew. It is the highest that our corporate membership has ever been at the Institute of Risk Management South Africa. And it really showed how risk management was so prominent. It was needed. It is needed in the country, and how organizations as a whole stepped up and said, we need to ensure that we have risk management properly embedded within our organizations, and that we are upskilling our staff, that our risk professionals are getting the correct support. And so that was something that was unbelievable. And we realized just how important it is to keep having these conversations. So last year, obviously, so we really did step up with digitalizing, getting our message out there. But the point being, and I'm linking it back to the board exams, is that now is the time to really ensure that you've built your credibility. I have no doubt you know your stuff, you do excellent work, but I think it is coming to a time as well where we need to make sure that we've got the right designations to help us really make that impact, and for people to sit up and make sure that they are listening as well. And so please, let's have a discussion about what it means to get those designations. What you might find is that when you look at the criteria, you might actually be able to be exempt from board exam 1 and go straight to board exam 2 and get the CRM Prof designation. But these are discussions really worth having, and my team are ready to have these discussions, and so am I. So let's have a look at it. And then, of course, the training in the year. Our education and technical committee and the training team really take a lot of time to put these programs together. And the content is key in terms of what you need at the moment. And something very exciting coming up during May, we'll be launching our hybrid training. And that's going to be done with a very special flair where we'll have the online, we'll have folk at home. So for example, if you're sitting in East London and you can't come to Joburg, because that is where it'll start, we'll have the training in classroom style in the training center in Joburg with very limited numbers, and obviously our COVID-19 health and safety procedures, it's really tight at our offices. And then we'll have those folks sitting there, and we will go online to the people that are at home, but not just sitting at home and dying from this online training where you just, lose track, but where we really are engaging properly with people at home. And you're gonna have to dress up. You can't stay in your jammies because you're going to be there, you're going to come on and talk and so on. So it's going to be a little bit different and very engaging. So we're trying to push it up and step up so that we make sure that we take this hybrid training and hybrid kind of event to a different level, so that we make sure that everyone is engaged and invested, because you really are investing in yourselves, and organizations are investing in you when you commit to the training, because it costs money. So we're really trying to make sure that we bring so much value to all of you and that it's enjoyable. I think that's what we need to do. Last year was so stressful and quite a strain for all of us. So it's time to really start enjoying ourselves again. So looking forward to that, really looking forward to that. So keep an eye on that, and that is where we're going as an IMSA. So this morning, you have a fantastic facilitator. You've got Hombakazi Funeka, who is from the Eastern Cape Committee. It's one of these wonderful, dynamic Eastern Cape Committee members that we've got down there. Hombakazi is the Director of Organizational Risk and Integrity Management at the Office of the Director General in the Eastern Cape. And Hombakazi will be facilitating and leading you through the program this morning. So we're really looking forward to that. Keep an eye on the chat box, because that is raise your questions, make comments, use the chat box. If you're on social media, our hashtag is live with UMSA. And then, of course, we're going to ask you to complete the survey at the end of the event, and just to give us feedback, because this, we are just evolving and learning. So you really need to give us good feedback, please. It's a big thing for us because we need to learn and grow. And then my events team are a little bit sneaky, because the team it's being recorded, as you can see. And you have full access to this recording afterwards, but only if you complete the survey. So that's very sneaky. I call it hashtag sneaky to the events team, but very good. And I'm looking forward to this morning, and I'm going to now hand over to Hombakazi, and let's get this going, because this topic today, gosh, it's exciting. Hombakazi, good morning.
Good morning. Hi, Julian. Hi, Julian. How are you?
Very well, and you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you so much. Good to see you this morning.
You as well. I'm really jealous of you in East London. I must tell you, we enjoy it. Weather's fine. We don't need the ocean.
And we do really have a beautiful morning today. We are going to have a brilliant day. We will, as soon as the things are more preferable and favorable, we would be glad to welcome you down here.
I cannot wait. So thank you so much, Hombakazi. I'm handing over to you. Let's have a great session.
All right. Thank you, Gillian. Thank you. Good morning, the risk management professionals. My name is Hombakazi Funeka. As Gillian has already made mention of, I am a director in the Office of the Premier, Eastern Cape. I am responsible for risk management and integrity management in the department. As introduced, I am a member of IMSA, the Eastern Cape Committee. After that warm welcome from Gillian, she did emphasize the issue of professionalizing risk management. It's very beneficial, especially if we need to be taking up our marching orders. We need all of us to hashtag step up. Now is the time. If anything from COVID we have learned, our colleagues, is that time and events can easily overtake us. We need to empower ourselves. We need to be ready all the time. We need to be walking the talk, because in our organizations, we need to be influencers such that the leadership take up the responsibility of being ready and resilient. We need to be their heart, pumping all the time. We need to be ready. Let's empower ourselves. Let's take up the membership with as well as the professionalization with IMSA. Gillian is providing perfect, great leadership, and she has a very energetic and professional team that has been working with us very much closely. We are benefiting a lot. Hence, as the Eastern Cape Committee, when we sat down, taking stock of where we are, in the list of our concerns, we noted that technological advancement, it's one of those things that keep on moving. And because technology is an enabler in all of our organizations, whether we like it or not now, time is moving, technology is moving, life is dynamic. And this is what we have been preaching in the risk profession. So we need to be evident, we need to be relevant all the time. So when we were looking at the technological advancement, we realized that in as much as ourselves as the Eastern Cape, we saw ourselves in a very vulnerable situation when it comes to the use of technology. And we have a lot of catch-up to do. But we realize that even the best of systems out there, they are really faced with a lot of cyber threats and attacks all the time and from all angles. Hence, we had to invite this capable panel this morning for you to really benefit from the wealth of experience that they have. We have three speakers that are really going to be sharing with us their knowledge on the topic cyber security and data protection. That is what we need to be using. That's what we need to inform the decision making. That's what we need to influence in our organizations for us to be resilient and be organizations that are going to hashtag step up, because now is the time. So colleagues, without really wasting your time, I want us to welcome our first speaker. His name is Mr. Guy Rich. Guy is an executive manager with GMR Strategic Management. Guy is a hard-working, driven individual who has skills, experience, and expertise in a wide variety of managerial, financial, operational, as well as administrative business function areas in both private and the public sector. Colleagues, join me in welcoming Mr. Guy Rich.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Hombakazi, thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. I'm not going to waste time, ladies and gentlemen. I know that time is money, as they say. So I'm going to kickstart straight into my presentation. Hombakazi has given a brief introduction of who I am and what I do. I believe that that's what Google is for. So if you want to go and find out more about me, please feel free. All right, I'm going to start my sharing. So just bear with me here. Okay, I assume everyone can see that. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, I've been asked to give you an overview of the Protection of Personal Information Act and just run through a couple of aspects of how it's going to impact business and how it's going to impact our lives going forward. So the ironic thing, when I was preparing this yesterday, believe it or not, I got an email from my vehicle credit provider, and they sent this through to me and they said, please be aware that we've had an information breach. We've had a data breach. You are not affected, but some of the information on our clients has been accessed, and we just want you to be aware of it. So ironically, when I was preparing this actually happened to quite a large organization. And in terms of the Protection of Personal Information Act, they are obliged to inform you of any breaches that have occurred. I know that most of us receive telephone calls on a daily basis from telemarketers, and you think to yourself, how the hell did they get my information? Where do these people get this information from? Data and personal information has become extremely, extremely valuable in today's society. It has been around for years, but with the advent of technology, data and personal information has become essentially a commodity. So what has happened in this particular instance is governments around the world have had to put in place measures to protect your information, my information, from being used in let's say, an unethical way, if I could put it to you that way. A lot of the telemarketers and these guys in the past have used personal information in very unethical ways. Luckily, these things are starting to be regulated now, but there's nothing more irritating than when you're sitting in a meeting, getting a telephone call from an unknown number, and someone says, oh, I'm phoning from Vodacom, or I'm phoning from here, I'm phoning from there, and we'd like to talk to you about ABC. So it has become an issue, and that is essentially the reason behind the Protection of Personal Information Act. By way of introduction, the Act was passed in 2013, and companies and businesses were given a year from the date of commencement of the Act to comply with the Act. The Act essentially came into effect on the 1st of July 2020. Government said, we're giving you a year to make sure that you all get your houses in order, and by 2021, we will start enforcing the Act. The Act requires lawful processing of personal information. Now, if I had to ask you, what kind of personal information have you got lying around your office? You'd say, well, not really much. but do yourself a favor and go and have a look on your desk. That business card that's lying on your desk, that invoice that's lying on your desk, that file, that client file that's on your desk, all of that information in one way or another represents personal information and can be used in one way or another by a third party. So the Act is applicable to both natural and juristic persons, individuals and companies, businesses with whom you work on a day-to-day basis. And the focus of the Act essentially is the effective and ongoing data privacy management and data breach risk reduction. As you know, everything is going technology-based these days. We're online most of the time. We do all of our work mostly through emails. Very few people use faxes anymore, if any. So all of that information is somewhere in cyberspace. And the question is, do we know where our information is? Are we protecting our information? And if something had to happen, what would we be able to do about it? What would the impact be from a risk perspective if people were able to access that information? So once again, we all know that information about medical conditions is very confidential, and you don't want that leaked, or you don't want that to fall into the wrong hands. From a government perspective, the Department of Health is going to have a huge, huge job in terms of making sure that all that personal information is secure. Why should we comply? So we live in a society, or we live in a time when compliance is becoming more the norm. And we are having legislation and regulations put in place on a daily basis, and it's adding additional burdens to companies. But these should be seen in the light of the fact that they are good burdens. Because if we comply with the POPI Act, we are seen as a trusted and responsible organization. The way that you use your data, the way that you use your personal information, how you secure it, all shows that you are a trusted and responsible organization. It shows that you are professional in an age of data privacy. I did some work with a large company about 2 years ago, and they said, no, sorry, you can't use your own computers, you have to use ours. And they had restricted their computers. You couldn't take a flash drive and take any information off their computers. If you tried to do that, it would immediately send an alert to the IT department, and the IT department would come down on your head very, very hard. In addition to that, if you wanted to take any information off the computer, you had to use an encrypted flash drive that they had provided to you. And only then were you able to remove any data from that computer. So for me, that gave an indication of how serious this company was taking their data privacy and their information privacy. In a time of technology today, business intelligence is highly prized, and any information you can get on your competitors obviously can put you one step ahead. The third element there is good governance. We all know the issue of good governance and the King reports, and the importance of this within the context in which we operate. So complying also shows that you are taking good governance very seriously, and it also shows that you are proactive in terms of risk-based thinking as well. The more we put technology in place, the more we adhere to the fourth industrial revolution. It's very much data-driven, it's very much information-driven, and we need to keep this in the back of our minds constantly in terms of saying, what are the risks associated with what we do and the information that we use? What is personal information? And this is a very, very broad definition. I'll show you a little slide just now about it as well. But it's information relating to an identifiable, living, natural person or an identifiable existing juristic person. And it's information about people and companies which is regarded as personal information. Now, you may say to me, but that's literally anything. Well, believe it or not, you're quite correct. It is literally anything about anyone or any business that can be used in one way or another, or that can be regarded as being, and I say confidential in the broader sense of the word. My name, for example, is out there on the internet. Yes, it's personal information, but it's publicly accessible. My age may not be that publicly accessible. My identity number is also not publicly accessible. So it's not available on a system out there where you can just go into Google and type in Guy Rich, and my name, my ID number, my address, my cell phone number, my marital status, my medical records, all of that comes up. So there is certain information that is publicly available that is regarded as personal information, but because it's publicly available, is not regarded as personal information, if I can put it to you that way. So personal information is any information about race, gender, sex, marital status, ethnic or social origin, color, age, disability, culture, language, birth. Now you may say, but when we do or when people apply for positions in our organization, they provide all of that information. Yes, they do. And it's important that you secure that information, you see it as personal information, and you protect that information. Educational, medical, financial, criminal, or employment history, very much personal information. People may not want that known. So on that basis, that has to be regarded as personal information and to be kept confidential. ID, email address, physical address, telephone number, all of that is all personal information. Biometric information, believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, is also regarded as personal information. So if you have a biometric access system in your workplace, those records need to be secured and they need to be kept confidential. Personal opinions, views, or preferences is also personal information unless, and here's the kicker, unless it is publicly available. So if you go and state something on Facebook, it is personal information, but it can be used by other people without any fear of them being sort of taken to court or taken to task about why they've used it, because you yourself have chosen to make that information public. Correspondence that is of private nature, that speaks for itself, that is confidential information, and then views or opinions of another individual about a person. So if you're talking around the water cooler and someone says, oh, you know, the CEO, I don't like her, she's an absolute tyrant, that is an opinion that's been expressed to you in confidence. That is regarded as personal information as well. So it's a very broad aspect in relation to what is and what is not personal information, but from a risk perspective, rather err on the side of caution than be caught wanting. POPI guiding principles. Here, POPI is about the protection of your personal information and how it is collected, used, and shared. And this is the important thing, ladies and gentlemen. The collection, the use, and the sharing of that information. That, in essence, forms the crux of what the Protection Act or the Personal Information Protection is all about. It's becoming, or personal information is becoming increasingly important in data-driven and online accessible worlds. And you know for a fact, I mean, you go into any website, it asks you for a username, it asks you for a password. There's 101 different things that you have to do in order to access information these days. But when we talk about ICT and internet connectivity, we talk about hacking, we talk about data theft, we talk about personal data usage. Those are all on the increase, and all of the criminal syndicates out there, all of these guys are becoming more and more sophisticated in the way that they do things. So my question to you today would be, how secure is the data that you have on your electronic devices? Your cell phone, your laptop, your tablet, your home computer. All of these things are connected to the world or to the online world. And somewhere along the line, if someone is able to access and get hold of that information, what damage could they potentially do? It guarantees, when we talk about the POPI Act, it guarantees the data subject a level of security and protection. So when I give you my information, when I fill in an application form for a job at your office and I send through my CV, you as the organization that is, number one, collecting the data and using the data must make sure that it is secured. And then I feel confident that I will provide my information and nothing further is going to happen to it. It should only be collected, or you should only collect information that is needed directly from the data subject. So it's no use, or saying, well, I need a CV from you, and I need a head and shoulders shot from you, and I need your medical records for the past 5 years, etc., etc., etc. You only collect that data that you need from that individual. When necessary, ensure that you get the consent to collect, use, and store the data or the information that you are using as well. So once again, we use the example of a person that's going to apply for a job. When you write to them, or when you put the advert out, or when you call them for an interview, you need to say to them that we are soliciting your CV purely for the purposes of the application for this particular job. And if you are unsuccessful, once the process is complete, your CV will be destroyed. Alternatively, if you want us to keep it on record, you need to give us your consent that we keep that file on record, and you need to stipulate for how long as well. And lastly, once the data, once the information is no longer needed, you need to make sure that you destroy it. Important POPI terms: the responsible party, any public or private body or person who processes personal information. So once again, this is extremely broad, but rather err on the side of the caution as an individual or as a business, to make sure that whatever information you have, whatever data you have on your clients, on your customers, on other companies, that you use it in the correct way and you secure it in the correct way. An operator is a person responsible for processing personal information, including any capturing, storing, or destroying. So the bottom line there is anyone in your organization that deals with personal information on a day-to-day basis is regarded as an operator. The processing aspect then comes in here to say any collection, receipt, recording, organizing, collation, storage, updating, modifying, retrieval, alteration, consultation, or use. And this always amazes me, because it covers literally everything that you do with information or data on a day-to-day basis. Dissemination of data is the transmission, distribution, or any other form. And then merging, linking, restriction, degrading, erasing, or destroying information. So once again, it's very, very broad, and we get questions all the time to say, well, how is government actually going to police this? How is this actually going to work in theory, or in practice rather, when it comes into effect? It's a very good question, and I don't think that it's going to be able to be policed as effectively or as efficiently as a lot of people hope that it is going to be. But the bottom line is it's legislated, and we need to make sure that we comply with it. There are 8 conditions for lawful processing which you'd need to know in your organization. Accountability: it's your responsibility to ensure lawful processing. So once again, essentially all they're saying here is, are you using the information for what you need to use it for and not beyond? Processing limitation: it's only used for its intended purpose, and you must have consent. You must be able to justify the use, and the collection is direct from the data subject, not from a third party. Purpose specification: why are you using it? Further processing limitations: if you're processing it beyond the original intention, it must be aligned to the original purpose. So once again, you may have received a CV from an applicant. They may not be successful for that position, but you may want to consider them for another position within the organization as well. It needs to be aligned to the original purpose. The information quality, bearing in mind the purpose behind it. The openness: you must specify why you're collecting it. The security safeguards: what have you got in place at every level? So who receives the CV? Who is storing the CV? Where does it go? What sort of processes and steps do you have in place to make sure that the right people are seeing the right information? I go back to the example to say that if I had to walk into your office, what personal data would be on your desk? And this is very important, because today with cell phones, someone can walk into your office. There could be a confidential piece of correspondence between you and a client lying on that desk. All they do is they whip out their cell phone, they take a quick snapshot of it, and before you know it, the client is phoning you and saying, but what's going on here? I told you this in confidence. I sent you a confidential letter or a confidential email, and now all of a sudden everyone knows about it. What's going on here? So it's very, very important that the security safeguards are in place. Many of us, we leave the office, we leave our laptops open or our computers open, and the email is on the screen. Someone walks in, they take a screenshot or they take a photograph of it, and before you know it, you're in trouble as far as the breach of security is concerned. And then lastly, the data subject participation. The subject must be able to access the info data that you have, must be able to correct it, and you must provide a manner of access as well. And that comes back to access to information, access to personal information. What information do you have about me, and can I see that? And I can then request what further you can do with it or can't do with it. Important considerations for companies these days is the volumes and types of information and data that you collect and use. As we've said, a lot of companies are becoming data-driven these days. We have got client files, we've got lead files, we've got lead databases, we've got Excel spreadsheets, you name it. There's so much information out there. And that's going to be important in how you approach your application of POPI within the environment in which you work. How is your information collected, stored, and shared? How and where do you use this information data, and do you share it with a third party? That last one becomes vitally, vitally important to say, if I do share it with a third party, why am I sharing it? Do I need to share it? And do I have the consent of the data subject to be able to share it moving forward? What do you need as an organization? And here we talk about a designated information officer or deputy information officer that needs to be registered with the regulator. Deputy information officer is only needed for large organizations which deal with a huge amount of data and information. It's your responsibility as an organization to comply with POPI. You need to ensure that your information officers or your deputy information officers, both of them are correctly appointed and aware of their roles and responsibilities, which means you need to go back to job descriptions, update them, and add that to their personnel file. You need to put a privacy policy in place, which essentially reflects your commitment to POPI. You need to share that, and you need to communicate it to internal and external stakeholders. You need to adhere to best practice as well and report on your POPI compliance in your annual report. So once again, this becomes an auditable, if I can put it to you that way, aspect within your business that you can report on as well. And you obviously, if necessary, need to include data privacy management in your management meetings if necessary, depending on the volumes and the business that you're in as well. Implications for non-compliance, and I'm going to finish off shortly, bear with me here. If there's a breach of confidentiality that can be reported to the regulator, and the regulator can then investigate, and if they find that there's a failure to comply with enforcement of the information notice, they can then take necessary steps against you. And the implications here are a fine or imprisonment of 10 years, which can be sanctioned by the magistrate's court, a fine or imprisonment of 12 months, or both, and then also an infringement fine by the regulator as well. Once again, how this is going to be policed is questionable, but time will tell. Frequently asked questions, just to conclude with, must I inform data subjects about why I collect their personal information? Yes. So whatever communication or whatever correspondence you have with your clients, with your customers, if you are soliciting or asking them for information, you need to indicate why. Can I track employees' internet email usage? Yes, you may, but it's subject to RICA and your company policy as well. Can we search employee cell phones and computers? Yes, you can, subject to RICA and the company policy that is in place as well. How long do I keep personal information? For only as long as it's needed to fulfill its intended purpose. After that, you would need to destroy it. Can I store job applicants' CVs indefinitely? No, unless you obtain consent. Can we keep personal information about employees who have left our company? No. Once again, once they've left, it's important for you to destroy their personnel files unless there's a justifiable reason to keep it. How do I delete or destroy personal information? This is important as well. You need to use national and international standards when shredding documents or clearing drives. Here, there are a lot of companies and businesses in this space that can help you with storage, that can help you with filing, that can help you with destruction of information, documents, or hard drives that are no longer needed. If an employee loses a company laptop containing personal information, what should we do? Well, Here you need to evaluate what's been lost. You've got to report it to the regulator, and you need to inform data subjects. So essentially what happened to me yesterday when my credit provider got hold of me or sent me an email, they said, we've had a breach. You are not affected. So they gave me the guarantee that I'm not affected, but they said as a caring company, as a company that values their customers, we wanted to inform you. And they also indicated what they were doing about it. Cloud storage is acceptable for personal information, provided that you have the necessary protocols in place. So your IT departments will obviously need to adhere to those. If we use a storage company, who's responsible? You are responsible ultimately. So if there's a breach through the storage company, you've given them your files, they've gone and they've stored it off-site. They get hold of you and they say, we've had a breach and certain files have been stolen. It's still your responsibility and you will be held liable and responsible for it. Do I have to protect personal information if it is available on social networks? Yes, you have to protect that information. The fact that it's available elsewhere does not negate your responsibility at the end of the day, but it will be taken into consideration. So ladies and gentlemen, that essentially is the POPI Act. Are there any questions? I see there's a Q&A here. Let me just open that. If you are a municipality and have a controlled entity and share information for similar use that is collected for, is that considered a violation of the data subject's rights? Yes, unless the data subject knows that you have you've collected that information and you are going to share it with the parent municipality. So you have to keep them informed. You must never assume that because you've collected information for your use and that of an associated entity, that they are going to give permission for that. Never assume. Rather err on the side of caution and ask them if they are happy, or inform them that you are going to share this information for the following purposes A, B, C, D, E. And allow them the opportunity to say, yes, we are happy, or no, we are not happy.
Wow. Thank you so much, Guy. That's so mind-blowing. It's quite an eye-opener. Thank you so much. I'm overwhelmed. I'm very much overwhelmed. This is very, very interesting. I don't even want to I know that the presentations, colleagues, we would be getting this wealth of information. There is a question, Guy, that we have received through our Q&A. We want to, there's Unoma Koringe, wanting to know about the breaches. If you are a municipality and you have entities within you, entities that you are controlling, now you happen to share information for similar use that you have collected it for, can that be considered a breach?
Well, as I mentioned just now, I think I answered the question to say that rather err on the side of caution and ask the data subject if they are happy that you share that information. Or when you originally collect it, state to them that you are collecting the information and that you are going to be sharing it with the municipality or with the entity, and then state the reasons for that. So it's always better to err on the side of caution than it is to make the assumption and then later have to pay the price.
Another one from Simi, asking, is there ways to upgrade infrastructure in the province to ensure that, oh, okay, all right. No,
I see it here. It says, I know some departments have already done this risk assessment and a key dependency is infrastructure investment. The responsibility lies with the department, it lies with government to make sure that its infrastructure is strong enough in order to ensure the data security and the information security. I've been to many government departments and it's actually an eye-opener, and it's very worrying because you walk into an office and you see files lying everywhere. You see boxes of data, boxes of information, boxes of application forms lying out in the open. I went into one of the departments in Bishop the other day, and they had boxes in the foyer area for applications. So, believe it or not. So people were dropping off their CVs in envelopes, in boxes, in the foyer of a government department. Now, all that had to happen is in the middle of the night, someone could walk in there, the security guard fast asleep, and they take 3 of those boxes or 4 of those boxes away. Huge data implications for that personal information. As at the end of June, if that happens, there's going to be huge ramifications. So there needs to be a commitment from government to make sure that its infrastructure is strong enough, both from a digital perspective and a non-digital perspective, that they are able to secure key information. So we're talking about locking filing cabinets and drawers, making sure offices are locked. When it comes to highly sensitive information, that there are strong rooms and that there are key areas where that information is held. You can't merely, because you don't like it, just shove it out in the middle of the passage and hope it's going to disappear. So I can tell you, you've got Wombakazi, you've got a big job ahead of you.
That one is very scary because I've seen it too. I've seen it too, the issue of the CVs, and it tells us as the risk professionals how much we really do not have time to step up. We have a lot to do. There's another quick one, I think is ISMA. What would be the most immediate considerations a municipality would need to take when considering areas where the COVID-8 may be at risk?
Okay.
Same as you've just alluded to. Now we know of live situations that we have now. We know that we're at risk.
I think the other thing there is you've got front office personnel that are dealing with personal information. So rates and taxes information, payment of electricity accounts and water accounts, any queries that people are coming into. So your front office staff, as remember we spoke about the operator, the front office staff that is collecting the data, that is processing the data, all of that, they need to be aware of the importance of the POPI Act. They need to be aware of the implications of not complying, and they need to make sure that they secure that data on a regular basis, because as I say, it takes one person to come in, see that information lying there, and you could be reported. So it's a combined aspect of training and understanding, infrastructure that needs to be in place, and then also monitoring and evaluating on a regular basis, because people would think, well, you know, this information is freely available, so I'll just leave it here lying on the desk. So your frontline staff need to apply it, your managers need to monitor and evaluate it, and your infrastructure needs to be in place in order to handle the volumes and the amount of personal information you process on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you so much, Guy. Thank you so much, Guy. I wouldn't have said it better. Colleagues, that was the presentation, so mind-blowing, so eye-opening. We have really a lot to be thankful for. Guy, thank you so much.
I see there's just one other question here from Zimasa that I just want to address before we finish. Do we have to appoint the information officer, or can we use one of our legal managers to take responsibility of the officer? You can appoint an existing manager or an existing person in your organization as the data or as the information officer. You just need to remember that you would need to update their or amend their job description or give them an annexure to the job description with their roles and responsibilities. It doesn't go associated with any additional remuneration. So you don't have to pay them for the additional responsibilities, but you would need to explain the responsibilities, their role, and you would obviously need to, if they needed resources, provide them with those as well. But yes, it can be an existing person.
Thank you so much, Guy. Thank you so much. We have a long way to go, but we appreciate all the help that we can get. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks, Wombakazi. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. All the best.
Thank you. Goodbye. Colleagues, we go now to the next presenter for this morning. In our panel, we have Junaid Amra. He is from the PwC. He's a partner who has been there since 2004. Junaid is a full member of the Institute of Commercial Fraud Practitioners. Remember, we are talking issues of breaches here and confidentiality and all of that. In his role, he is involved with assisting clients in dealing with various technology issues. His area of expertise includes the following: cybercrime investigations, cybersecurity reviews, ethical hacking reviews, social engineering, King IT governance implementation, sorry, privacy legislation, sorry, as well as development of IT strategic plans. So colleagues, let me welcome Mr. Junaid Amra to share with us this morning.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and thanks for the introduction, Kazi. Sorry, can everyone hear me well?
Yes, you are audible. We can hear you.
Great, thanks. Okay, I think I'm also going to jump straight into the topic for this morning. So the topic that I'm going to be speaking about is the fourth industrial revolution and some of the risks that we're seeing coming from a cybersecurity perspective, where clients are implementing all of the new technology, which is great, but it's obviously coming with risks that are starting to manifest themselves as we're seeing these implementations becoming more and more common. So maybe just jump into the topic. In terms of a definition, what is the fourth industrial revolution, right? We hear a lot about it. So obviously, the first one, you had the first industrial revolution was mechanization, where steam power really drove that. Then you had mass production driven through electricity. Then we saw automation coming a bit later, where computer technology was being used to automate processes. And this fourth industrial revolution now is where we're talking of autonomous, self-learning, artificial intelligence-driven capabilities that we're seeing starting to be implemented. So it's not really an extension of the third industrial revolution, as from what we're seeing is the rate of change is unprecedented. Growth is exponential in terms of the new technologies that we seeing being deployed. And also the types of technologies we're seeing being deployed are not things that we've seen before, right? So which gives rise to this whole thing around the fourth industrial revolution. So if you look at what's on the slide, it's really this digital transformation, like Guy also mentioned, and you're seeing the need for the data protection laws, etc., because this whole age is really geared around data gathering, analysis, prediction capabilities based on utilizing this information. And a bit later in the presentation, I'll discuss some of I'll show you examples of where things are going wrong also in this space. And the last one is interesting, right? So you're seeing the convergence of digital, biological, and physical technology. So what you're also seeing is, or you're going to start seeing more of, is technology being implanted into humans. So, and you're seeing form factors changing, etc. So it's really a whole new era. If I'm looking at MIT, I think they appointed someone more with a biology background to head some of the tech faculties, which is interesting. But it also shows this melding of technology and into the human form, right? So there's obviously good and bad uses. I mean, there'll obviously be a lot of development in way of assisting people with disabilities. You're looking at eyesight, limbs, etc., where you're finding things coming out there. On the other side, if you look at military implementations, what we've already seen is where I'm forgetting which military it was, but they actually ran an experiment where they implemented something like a GPS unit into someone. So this person could tell north automatically without needing a compass. And then after 6 months, when they removed this implant, the person behaved as if they'd lost a limb, right? So that's just to give you an idea of where we're heading with that technology. So just looking at the last few decades, just in terms of how we got here, right? If you look at the 1980s in the corporate world or business world, effectively your computer networks were pretty much closed. You had internal use of systems. We started opening it up. Then you got emails coming in, etc. So you created the small hole in your network, which allowed emails to come in and out. Then we started linking our operational technologies that normally run our businesses in the background to the networks. Then around 2000, we started seeing those operational technologies and your network starting to become more exposed to the internet. You had e-commerce, etc. Starting. And then in 2010 onwards, we started seeing another set of technologies. So you had your normal IT, which was traditionally there. That's your normal corporate networks, your emails, all your internal systems, your operational technologies that run operational processes. And then we started seeing consumer technology linking in. So think of your devices like your Fitbits or other devices that even sometimes connect to your medical insurers, etc. So what's been happening over time is we've effectively been creating a bigger and bigger attack surface for attackers to do their thing effectively, right? That's where they launch attacks against cyber infrastructure. And as we increase this surface area for attack, it's obviously from an organizational perspective becomes that much harder to also protect against the sort of the number of attacks that you could possibly be facing. So if you look at what the modern business ecosystem looks like, if you look at that center picture, you've got your enterprise with what used to be a very defined perimeter that's now become blurred, because where does your network end? You actually can't define it anymore. You've got all your suppliers, you have service providers, you have a host of other third parties who have access to your networks and or in some shape or form are passing information or interacting with your networks. And as a result of that, any risk that they have on their side could essentially become a risk to your organization, right? Then if you look at the threats on the left-hand side, your four key threat actors that we see operating out in the cyber world are organized crime. So effectively, their motivation is monetary, right? So they're chasing anything which they can be converted to provide financial benefit to them. Then you have hacktivism, which is your hackers who express themselves, activists who express themselves through hacking. And we saw a lot of that with events like the Arab Spring. Last year, we saw Blue Leaks in the US, where about 135 law enforcement agencies were breached and information relating to personnel, was released online. Then the other one you have is insiders. Insiders are essentially trusted parties. It could be employees, third parties, people with access to your networks. And what we've seen in the South African context, obviously organized crime does leverage insiders a fair amount, but they are also fairly open to being used by any of the other categories of threat actors. So your hacktivists, nation states, etc., often use insiders to assist them with what they're doing. And then the last category is nation states on the slide, right? Nation state is state-sponsored hacking, and as much as every country says that they're not involved in it, everyone is pretty much involved in this. So you have cyber warfare departments in most militaries now, and you have some that don't seem to be affiliated, but are actually acting on behalf of the nation states and launching attacks, right? So if you look at towards the end of last year, we saw a number of organizations being breached, and how this was happening was we had threat actor or nation state backed hackers from North Korea who were essentially sending IT administrators job offers online, and embedded in those emails was also malware. So the offers were fairly lucrative, so it would entice them to open the document. Once they opened it, they'd introduce malware onto their own systems, which would then provide the attackers with the administrators' credentials, which are essentially the keys to an organization because of the level of access they have, right? So it's just one example, but there's tons of examples happening in that space. If you look at the right-hand side, I mean, just some of the outfall, which most of us would be aware of, or the impacts, your disruption to business, reputational data loss, disruption to services. and going down that list. And then obviously what we're seeing that's growing is regulatory impacts, and that's from legislation that's been passed like POPI. In South Africa, we're also seeing the Cyber Crimes and Cybersecurity Act that's coming through, etc. So we're seeing a lot more regulation in that space, which is obviously resulting then in organizations feeling that impact once they have a breach. So so that was a bit of, we jumped around a bit. So at the beginning, I gave you a definition of 4IR. We spoke a bit about the cybersecurity landscape. Now, if we look at, the types of tech that we're seeing being deployed by organizations, and this is based on a PwC study where we looked at about 250 technologies. We honed in on 8 that we can see are being adopted by business and are going to be adopted probably in the next 3 to 5 years. Right? And I think most of them you would have heard or seen already in some shape or form out there. So if I go from the top left, artificial intelligence, I think a lot of us are aware of this here, but it's basically that autonomous decision-making or insights that, that's where we're using artificial intelligence to do things, right? So all those chatbots that you have on websites that you're interacting with, as well as various other technologies that organizations are sometimes using to make decisions, banks regarding loan applications, etc. Then you move on, you have augmented reality, and augmented reality is really where you augment an artificial world into the real world. So a good example of that was the game that the kids were playing a little while ago, was that Pokemon game where you had all these characters who were appearing in the virtual characters appearing in the real world that they were chasing around. What we've seen here already from a cybersecurity perspective, one person had written code that would hide any moving cars. This is for those, you get those glasses or those devices that you wear and you could walk about. So it's normally would superimpose the internet. You could search while you're walking and see maps, etc. But if you think of this now, if you're able to write a piece of software code that hides a moving vehicle while you're wearing these glasses, you could walk into the path of and basically injured or killed. So those are some of the threats that you're starting to see already as the technology is starting to be adopted. Blockchain, we've heard a lot of this. It's really it provides integrity around transactional data or any form of data that you're using with the blockchain algorithms. Moving down to the Internet of Things, it's really all the smart devices that we seeing around. So it's some smart capabilities. What you're starting to see also is what they're calling intelligent Internet of Things. That's really devices that one is they can pick up the information, but also make some decision based on it. So if you're looking at the mining industry, etc., you're starting to see intelligent devices that monitor air quality in the mine shafts, overloading of lifts, etc. 3D printing, that's an interesting one. So it's going to revolutionize the manufacturing space. It's where, as long as you have the schematics or plans for something, you'd be able to potentially print a part. So we're already seeing that. And again, we saw it within the International Space Station about 2 years back. The astronauts forgot a particular wrench. They sent the schematics up to the space station, they printed it. And then from a business perspective, we're starting to see it in the mining industry again, where parts for machines are sometimes sent, schematics are sent across and they print these they print the actual part at the remote site. So what this means to the manufacturing space is that intellectual property is really going to be something that attackers are after, or competitors even. And we've already seen one case in South Africa that I'll talk about in a bit later. Virtual reality been around for a while, and it's really a completely virtual world. So that's the difference between augmented reality and virtual. So the virtual reality is really a completely virtual environment, and again, adoption is picking up space here. Then if you look at robotics, what you're seeing is the materials used to make robots have effectively become more lifelike. So we're reaching a state where it's going to be more difficult to distinguish between a human and a robot, because they're not going to have those jerky hydraulic movements anymore. There's newer materials that actually respond to electrical impulses and behave just like muscle. So we're definitely seeing a shift. So this is giving rise to ethical discussions around whether all robots, as an example, should have some defining mark so that you know that they're a robot and not human. So that'll be an interesting space to watch. And then the last one, I think we've all seen, and probably even own some of these devices, are drones. So you get obviously submersibles, you get the drones that we're used to seeing that fly, and you get terrestrial drones as well, and they're being used for various purposes. So that's the sort of technologies that we're going to be seeing that organizations are going to be adopting. It's not going to be individual technologies, but it's going to be a mix of these technologies to perform some functions, right? And that's still happening. And this next slide really speaks about the Gartner hype curve. And what this does is it just plots the sort of life cycle of technology as it comes. So on the left-hand side is when technology just comes in from a research and development perspective. You have some sort of a trigger. And then what happens is you have this, what they call the peak of inflated expectations, where people think it's going to solve all the world's problems effectively. And then you enter into what they call the trough of disillusionment, where you actually start seeing what it can and can't do. And that leads into what they call the slope of enlightenment and the plateau of productivity. And why this is important for organizations is to understand, based on your risk appetite, where do you want to sit, right? Are you on the bleeding edge of technology, or are you going to be taking more mature technologies in-house for use? Because obviously your exposure on the left-hand side of this graph is much more compared to the right-hand side. Maybe on a lighter note, when I presented this at another forum, someone mentioned that their marriage seemed to have followed the same sort of trending from a graph perspective. So this is just an example of a populated hype cycle. This is one. So Gartner releases these for most industries. This is for the manufacturing industry, released in 2020, and you'll see on the extreme left, they'll show you technologies that are really in its infancy, and the colored dots on the graph represent the number of years it has, well, they're assuming, to maturity, right? And you'll see some things will reach obsolescence before getting to maturity, meaning that other technologies will probably supersede them. So this is often good to look at, again, from a strategy perspective, to understand, maybe there's mature technologies even as an organization that you're not using because you're not in tune with your market. So it's often a good benchmark to take a look at this, but also to assess your risk appetite and understand where you want to play. Okay, so if you look at where challenges are coming around from a risk perspective in this space with technology adoption, one is we're finding organizations are not properly understanding their own threat landscape, and what we mean by that is, I discussed the types of attackers that we see out there, your nation states, insiders, organized crime, hacktivists, etc. And it's to understand what sort of attackers you will be attracting as an organization, because then you know how to protect yourself, right? And some of the triggers even that would attract some of these attackers. And a good example here was, I think it was around 2016, where the SABC changed their broadcasting rules. So they stopped broadcasting riots or violent protests, etc. And as a result, over that weekend, a hacktivist group brought down all the SABC external systems, your web pages, etc. And that was a direct response to that. In Brazil, we saw when they were hosting the World Cup, the population, the civilians didn't support the government hosting it. As a result, a lot of the sponsors suffered cyber attacks. The sponsors of the World Cup suffered cyber attacks from hacktivists, again, because of their stance in still going ahead and supporting this, even though the population didn't support it. So those are sort of the things we need to be aware of and understand the potential impacts. Then moving on the right-hand side, you have ethics, regulations, and privacy. Guy covered a lot of the privacy aspects, and we're going to see more regulations coming through there. From an ethical perspective, I'll touch on some examples just now that will maybe unpack some of those. But also, if you think autonomous driving vehicles, the algorithms, or the thought process around those algorithms that govern those vehicles was to limit the loss of life, right? So what it means is that if you're one occupant in a car and maybe there's 10 people crossing the road, your car might decide to sacrifice your life, right? Would you still buy the car? So those sort of the discussions that we're seeing in that space. If you're looking at organizational structure and accountability, the issue here that I'm seeing is that we're finding operational technology. So if I'm looking at manufacturing, looking at mining, also the aerospace industry, etc., where you have areas that were traditionally managed and run by people of an engineering background, you're starting to introduce all this technology. In some org structures, they still somehow owning this technology. So as a result, those technologies are very much exposed to cyber risk. Sometimes IT doesn't even know about them because they've just treated it like how they've always been treating the other devices they were deploying in those spaces. So it's really redefining some of this to bring it under IT's wing, but having maybe the application layer, the actually specialized applications that are being run, those aspects managed by the specialized teams, right? But all of essentially what I'm saying there is that all of the technology needs to fall under a similar level of protection from a cybersecurity perspective that IT uses. Then if you look at asset prioritizations, to know your assets, know what you call your crown jewels within an organization, what would an attacker be after if they came into your organization, right? So some things are going to be legislated, some things would be obviously your own intellectual property that an attacker might be after. So things like personal information, it's legislated, you are going to have to protect it at a high degree anyway. Understanding your current security posture is important. And the other thing here is that over the years, what we found is your audit and risk committees have accepted a lot of risk, and especially in the IT space, where they said, we'll just live with certain things. So you get your auditors, your external auditors raising things on a continuous basis, and they end up accepting those risks. All of those previously accepted risks in the cyberspace need to be reevaluated based on this changing landscape. There's some of those risks that we maybe accepted 5-10 years ago that we can't live with in the current threat landscape that we're dealing with. Okay, third-party connections, third parties as a whole present a huge risk. In South Africa, with all the incidents we've responded to in the last 2 years, all the attacks had emanated from a third party who had access to a client's network. So the third party sometimes had lower security or was breached through various means, and that resulted in an attack against our client's network. So what we're finding is you have a lot of specialized vendors sometimes providing robotics or other types of security or technology implementations, and we need to manage the amount of access they have, the types of devices they're plugging in. At one plant that I went to, the vendor had just plugged in 3G cards all over the show into their devices, but those devices were also connected to our client's network. So it creates a bridge from the outside, from the internet, that bypasses all your security and effectively starts threatening your own network infrastructure. From a risk assessment perspective, I think here the biggest failing that we've seen with internal audit teams and internal risk teams is that they sometimes don't have the skills to assess something, but they still go ahead and do it and give false assurance. And as a result, a day or two after deploying new technology, you'll find that a client has a breach of sorts, or over time that happens. So also linked to that is probably get the right third party, even if using third parties to assess the technology, because not everybody is aware of everything now, especially with this rate of change that we're experiencing. And then in the last one, it's really clear cut. It's organizational culture. It's your training, making people aware. When it comes to privacy as well, it's embedding that ethos or those thinking into into all of your training, so that staff, as a matter of course, will actually perform or take cognizance of cybersecurity, how they handle personal information, etc. It just becomes business as normal. So, earlier I mentioned just some of the, we've seen some of these, not really failings or new attacks happening due to technologies being deployed. If you look on the top left, so Apple runs their credit cards through Goldman Sachs, and on the back end, there's some sort of an algorithm that's been used to determine whether somebody's, or to set people's credit limits. What it found is that there's obviously some bias that's been programmed into it, where a male and a female earning the same with a similar financial and risk profile, but females seem to be getting lower limits. So the software, the algorithm, sees women as a greater risk from a financial perspective. So again, that's come to light where people with similar earnings, male and female, realized that they were getting different credit limits out there. So that's blown up. If you look at the center picture, what we're finding is with AI and a lot of the programming, the bias of people, the actual programmers who are programming the AI, is coming into the bots. So the bots are behaving with the same bias as the person who coded it has. That's interesting. With 3D printing, we've seen somebody print a gun using plans off the internet. So fully, basically, unlicensed, unknown weapon was created using the plans from an online resource. It was also printed in plastic, which would mean it could potentially go through airport security. So those are some of the things we're seeing there. On the bottom right, in the US, one of the sheriff departments used an algorithm to predict who might commit a crime. Unfortunately, people started reacting. That's the actual police. They started going and arresting and harassing people who hadn't as yet committed a crime, right? So because it predicted that the person might be open to committing a crime, they actually started increasing surveillance, etc., around those individuals, and as a result, that's also blown up. On the bottom left, it's a bit of a different type of an attack that we saw. It's pretty much run by security researchers. It's your Alexa device that you have, in your homes. That's with your connected homes, from a building that's about 75 meters away. They were able to aim a laser at the device and put malicious code onto the device, which then gave them access to everything that was happening in the room. You can hear everything. You'll also be able to put transactions with the person's credit card that device is linked to, etc. So these are just some of the new world threats or risks that we're starting to see come about as we deploy these technologies, and it's to take cognizance and really manage our deployments around this. Very quickly, sorry, I'm running out of time, but there's two examples that I thought would be interesting where we worked on matters. So in the manufacturing industry, we're finding, or we had a case where clients who had cyber incidents, and this is effectively where attackers have attacked their networks through various means. In one case, we saw what we call a zero-day exploit. That means that malware was seen for the first time in the world at this particular client site. The key thing here is that as you're deploying more operational technologies, what we realized during an attack like this, you needed to separate your corporate network, or have the ability to separate your corporate network from your robotics or your operational technologies, because then the business can still run as normal, and you can still, hopefully not disrupt your production or operational, whatever it is that your business does there. So that became extremely critical in terms of ring fencing that environment, being able to shut it off the internet and get it to run, and even shut it off from the corporate network to an extent in order to keep that running. And then, the second one I had already alluded to, it's where we had a case of industrial espionage. So one of a client in South Africa makes very specialized hardware devices, but those hardware devices use obviously some proprietary software to run them. We saw this software was actually stolen by an employee who left, and another company hired him, and then we started seeing the similar products to our clients starting to be manufactured in the US and being offered to European organizations, etc. And when we traced it back, we were actually able to prove that they had leveraged our client's software from in South Africa. So again, these are the threats that again, with more tech adoption, we need to be aware of. Okay, very quickly then, in summary, in terms of how these, some of the mitigations we can look at in terms of these threats, having a holistic cybersecurity strategy, including recovery. So we're seeing attacks becoming more and more devastating. I mean, one we did in June last year. The client has probably a 20,000 person network or user base. They had to completely shut down their network and disconnect from the internet. The entire network was compromised. So we're seeing more and more occurrences of widespread attacks where your entire network is affected. So previously, this used to sit on risk registers as a high risk but low probability. The probability of this now is shifting upwards because attackers are spending a lot more time in embedding themselves on your network, so that when they launch an attack, it's that much more devastating. Also, in terms of your recovery procedures, what you need to be thinking about is where we're using things like voice over IP and other technologies. If your network is down, you effectively have no access to phones, you've got no access to emails, and in cases where we had lots of encryption across the networks during these attacks, you also didn't have access to HR records. Both the disaster recovery and live systems had been encrypted. So how do you go about setting up, alternate communication bands, etc., to your employees and that out there, right? So this obviously lends itself to the next point about your incident response processes need to be geared towards your environment. From a monitoring perspective, we're finding still organizations are monitoring more for audit purposes rather than for giving organizational value. That's monitoring your networks to look for signs of attack, etc. Then your employee upskilling and awareness training, that's a continuous thing that needs to happen. It's often lacking. It's done point in time and forgotten about. And then the second last one there is really your IT technology vendors and third parties. Is that due diligence you're doing around them, besides the financial, the type of service they're providing, the cost that they're providing it to you at. What's becoming more important is that you need to assess their security posture, because if they have a weak security posture and not adopting the right things, they effectively could be presenting a risk to your organization. And then the last one I already touched on is getting the right assurance providers involved when you deploying technology. This is my last slide. So, in conclusion, I think with all of the changes we're seeing, the convergence of technologies, it's definitely changed the landscape. Your board and executive levels need to be involved in decision-making and understanding cybersecurity as well. They can't be operating outside of that. What you'll see now is that there's no such thing as a digital strategy anymore, because technology is so embedded in our business processes that it's, you discuss normal business processes, but that ends up using technology. So it's not divorced like it used to be previously. Embedding cybersecurity, the third point is embedding cybersecurity from inception for technology implementations and not just at the end in assessing it. And then point 4 is critical, right? Know your attackers, know who would want to attack your organization, then understand what it is that they would want, what would their threats be, their motives, the potential means that they'd use, and the methods as well. That helps you to set up playbooks in order to better defend yourself. And then the last one is really implementing incident response and communication plans in line with that. That's really the end of my presentation. Happy to take questions at this point.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Khalid. That was a mouthful. That was really a lot for us to take in, with a number of answers or responses from the previous presentation that we had. But the way I see it, it gives us more of the thinking tools for us to really go and do, as we need to be stepping up and bringing some of this knowledge closer to the leadership of our organizations. Because I heard you talking about the audit and risk committees accepting a number of shaky risks. So we have a role to play there to make sure that it doesn't even go there without the leadership of the organization itself being aware of the risks that they are accepting, or those that they are ongoingly managing without really doing anything, because we're being enabled by technology. However, the impact of the attacks and all of the hacks. I think, I'm not so sure if we have any questions. I don't see any. I think this one needs us to really sit with it and, and digest and think and have implementation tools going forward. But we really appreciate you and your time and the information that you've shared with us this morning.
Sure. Okay, no, thank you so much for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Let's move ahead then, colleagues. We are going to have our third and the last speaker for the morning. That would be Mr. Craig Roseman. He is a managing director with the Wolfpack Information Risk, a South African firm that was established in 2011. It specializes in cyber threat intelligence, research, training, awareness, as well as advisory services. We are really getting a lot this morning. We are really getting empowerment. Colleagues, help me to welcome Craig. Thank you.
Thanks, folks. Let me quickly just start my timer. So I've got 30 minutes to talk. All right. Very rapidly, what I'm going to be focusing on today, and I'm using the term rapid, is we've seen organizations that are battling to, sorry, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see you.
But can you see the screen? Because I've just moved screens to present.
Yes.
Okay, so you can see the slides. All right, thank you. We've seen people in organizations actually battling to get an understanding of what the actual risk is that they're trying to manage. And sometimes these things are long-winded. And I thought to myself, many, many years ago, there's got to be a quicker way of doing it. So what I want to share with...
We are missing the slides. We can see you on the screen.
Sorry, because when I changed, then it actually seems to have moved it away. Okay, I presume you can see that now?
There it is, thank you.
All right, super. Apologies about that. So what I'd like to share with you is an approach that anyone can do in the organizations to actually get to the bottom at a very, very high level of the key risks facing the organizations, that has a very strong business alignment element, as well as touching on the key information risk blocks. So this is a quick overview of what I'm going to be focusing on today. And I'm going to be taking through, there's two different components to this, the business impact review and the rapid information risk health check. And we've done this in companies where it takes an hour and a half's worth of time, where we work with a very small team to actually unpack this. So as I said, this is something very, very rapid and quick. So what does this thing actually entail? So our approach is we have people in the room, we facilitate a session where we brainstorm 3 highly probable scenarios that's going to have a significant impact on the organization, and we use that and unpack those high impact scenarios in more detail to understand what is, in terms of the actual information, the people, the technology, the infrastructure, etc., that is behind that. So that's the one thing, to provide a good context to the team. And then secondly, we do a gap analysis against our information risk framework. Now, this is actually composed of various best practice frameworks out there, such as the NIST, the ISO, the CIS 20 critical controls, as well as key data protection components. And also what Junaid has mentioned earlier, also in terms of innovation, other areas as well that are not always considered, like marketing and social media, etc. as well. So out of this, you then get to understand what are the high impact, high probability risks, okay? And it's up to the team around the room to actually say, well, now that we understand this a bit better, what are the actual timeframes that we need to do? So we have different categories of prioritization for that. And then of course, the other less critical elements get put into an ongoing transformation program that many companies have in place already in terms of either preparing for POPIA or for managing cyber risk. Okay, so that at a high level is the approach. And I think, one of the challenges is when you're dealing with whether it's executives, line managers, or even the average user in an organization, you have to break it down and move away from the techno talk to something that typically everyone understands. So if we take a step back and we look at our own personal lives, if we are not feeling well, we all go through periods where we're either sick or something is just not right. We maybe in this case, we have severe headaches, knee and chest pain. There's been a lot of weight gain. I think that would be quite common for many people, unfortunately, in the room with us, spending most of our days sitting behind computers nowadays and not as active as we used to be. There's a lot of things that we would have to consider in treating the initial pain, but then also implementing a lifestyle change, all right, to look at what is the root cause behind these things. And what most of us do in the situation is we go and visit our general practitioner, our doctor, and we sit behind the desk and we say, "Doctor, I'm not feeling well." And the doctor would ask you a couple of questions around where are you feeling pain, ask you some questions about your lifestyle. Of course, they have to consider things such as your family history. Is there a history of maybe cancer or other things in your family? What operations have you had in the past? What are you allergic to, etc.? So there's a high-level background check that gets conducted. And based on that, the doctor will then refer you to other specialists to go and get certain things done. So it could be a brain scan, get put onto a heart monitoring device, maybe some blood urine tests, some x-rays, for example, to further unpack what they believe is the root cause of what's behind this whole thing, okay? Because at this stage, you don't really know. And then you get a number of options. So there could be a short-term solution, which might involve a bit of surgery and some medication, maybe if there's a bacterial infection or something. And then, of course, you have to make changes to your lifestyle. So you can't carry on the way you are. You have to maybe look at managing your stress a bit better through exercise, healthy diet, losing weight, etc., etc. All right. So I think we all understand that concept from a personal point of view. And I thought to myself, this actually would be a very good concept to use with organizations, with the people around the desk that you are talking to. So with that mindset, all right, this is what I want to share with you today. Quite a nice approach that works really well because everyone's busy. They don't have lots of time. And using that same analogy of going and visit the GP, but looking at the business context with a team of people around the room and looking at some of the issues that the company is facing. That will help to unpack, some of the bigger concerns in the organization where they are concerned, and it needs deep analysis. And then, of course, that same mindset around the potentially having an operation and taking antibiotics for the short-term things. So there's critical risks that need to be addressed really, really quickly, 3 to 6 months. And then, of course, your longer-term lifestyle changes. This is more referring to the actual longer-term program that gets put in place, 1 year, 3-year program, which I think aligns quite nicely with the lifestyle changes that you would need to make in your personal life, right? And of course, just using the company analogy in line with the personal analogy. So with that mindset, let me talk you through what I think is a really, really good approach that you can follow in your own organizations. So firstly, from a business impact point of view, you guys have heard about the Pareto principle, 80-20 principle, and I will unpack that just now in looking at, of course, you can't look at the whole organization and all the risks in an hour and a half. Okay, that would be ridiculous to state that, but you can get an understanding of what are the key high-level concerns that it gives an organization a good starting point. So some of the building blocks, just to put things into perspective. Every company out there has business assets in place, okay, that is important and vital to the running or the successful running of the organization. Increasingly, these are underpinned by IT assets, OT assets, and in what Junaid spoke about earlier, it could be your 4IR assets as well, or the new technology, the IoT stuff, etc., that's coming out as well. So that underpins a lot of the business processes that are out there. These are under attack or in danger from various threat agents outside the organization or within the organization, whether it's malicious, whether it's accidental, all right? And there's a number of threats that need to be considered. These threats are going to compromise weaknesses in the organization, vulnerabilities where people don't have the necessary skills, processes are not being followed, technology has not been implemented properly, or there's no technology in place, okay? And that results in the business having an impact, all right? And we all know that, risk management is really around the organization not achieving its objectives, all right? So it's less of a red flag type of thing, and it's more of a business-focused approach that we all need to adopt. So we put in place information risk controls to actually manage that. And just by terms of definition, when I talk about information risk, it's a collective that looks at a number of common areas such as information security, cyber security, and then the data protection elements of when it comes to personal information protection as well. So that's sort of a broad brushstroke that we use when I'm talking about that. So the business impact review looks at those elements. The information risk review focuses on those elements. And ultimately, I think by doing that, you get a far better balance and a perspective around what are the high risks, yes, but also what is most important to the business and what the business feels is more important to prioritize, not typically what the information security or the CISO person feels is the most important. You need to get that balanced approach, that teamwork focus. So in order to understand from a business impact point of view, this is a really nice exercise that you can do within the organization, because number one, you can't deal with this thing on your own. Whether you're a risk officer, someone in IT, or someone in security, you can't manage this beast on your own, all right? You've got it's definitely a team effort. So to get around the table, key people in the organization that can provide input into this, and ready to map out on one page what is critical to the organization. So that 80-20 point of view, 20% of our sort of core assets and stakeholders and customers that are critical to 80% of either the revenue of the business or the objective meeting capability of the organization. So as an example, this could be the strategic stakeholders. Government might be a strategic stakeholders, the shareholders and finances of the organization, regulators, core third parties and suppliers to the business. If it's a manufacturing company, for example, that is, of course, very, very critical. Tangible assets, in other words, assets that we can touch and see, would be employees. And of course, if it's an industrialized type of organization or whatever the type of organization, there's going to be various trade unions that are involved as well. So money, finances of the organization is a tangible asset. core applications that the organization, it could be anything from SAP to anything else, whether it's run natively or on-site or in the cloud. And then, of course, key infrastructure, think about a factory or the equipment, right from the actual hardware, software elements within an organization as well. So the intangible assets, that's things like intellectual property, very importantly, brand reputation of an organization. And then, of course, the goodwill that we maybe have with our staff, or the goodwill that, and relationships that we have with our key partners, clients, and then the strategic plans of an organization. So these are some examples that I'm putting down. You know, it will be relevant for many companies out there, but some, you know, might have a different sort of focus. And then when it comes to strategic customers, it could be, you know, large customers, bigger clients, government as a core part of that as well. Maybe if you're a business to consumer type company, then the local consumers or the community that you need to be involved with. Could be international clients, maybe collaborative vendors where you have interactions with them in terms of them selling stuff through your organization. All right, so the reason why we do this is for everyone to understand in the group what are the most important things in our organization. And if these are the most important building blocks of our organization, you know, then from a risk point of view, this is where an impact to any one of these will have quite a significant impact to the organization. And then we encourage the people in the room to think about 3 different types of things that can go wrong with the organization. And we break it down into the 3 different components: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And we say, okay, let's pick any one of these and let's follow a chain of thought. So for example, under confidentiality, we choose the example of employees, integrity, large customers. Availability could be your core infrastructure equipment that is important. But I mean, you could do that across any one of these components as well. And follow the line of thinking, because you'll see this table now, it starts to build out as we go through the approach. So as part of the business impact review, let's understand who are the key threat agents that your organization needs to be concerned about, and that will in turn assist with mapping out what are the threats. Because we know from various research that is out there, reports that come out on an annual basis. This is something from the Verizon data breach report, for example, where they look at actual incidents that have taken place around the world, and they map it according to various industries. So for example, healthcare, professional services, public sector, for example, with incidents or breaches, and then they look at patterns, you know, around what actually, where did the attack take place, and what action was used, and what asset was actually compromised. So there's a lot of good intel out there, and of course, subscribing to threat intelligence services that can give us a good view of what is happening in our industry as well. So in this case, we have a range of hostile threat actors, and we have non-hostile threat actors, okay, where something maybe happened accidentally instead of maliciously. And in this case, we've chosen 3 that, you know, these are, we see in incidents that we help our clients with, and just general news happening around the world. These are the 3 that I think are very, very real for South Africa, you know, malicious insider, organized crime group, and then the untrained employee. And building on that now, we say, right, for the asset employees, there is a malicious insider, and we saw this happen twice last year to quite high-profile companies that we you know, part of our clients, where they post very, very sensitive information on staff and salary information to social media. All right, causing a lot of reputational harm to the organization. Secondly, for an untrained employee, a breach of sensitive customer information and potentially pricing. So where a person shouldn't have done something, they've got a lot of information sitting in an Excel spreadsheet and they mail it out to the wrong people. We know this happens quite easily, or you know, by accident, but you know, a lot of harm gets caused as a result. And then another, of course, we've seen a lot of ransomware attacks happening in South Africa as well. And in this case, against the business asset infrastructure and equipment, organized crime launches a targeted ransomware attack, okay? So still part of this theme, we now need to look at what will the actual impact be to the business. And every company has got different rating scales. We look at financial, stakeholder impact, legal, regulatory, brand reputation, business interruption, and people, all right? And you would have different, we use the term harm tables. So in other words, if it's financial, anything under 500,000 is a low impact, between 500,000 and 2 million is, medium, and anything above 10 million is a high, and anything above 100 million is critical. All depends on the size and the nature of the organization. And that same thresholds are, look at downtime and look at impacts to the organization. So using that same analogy now, where we have the malicious insider that posted sensitive information to social media, the impact obviously would be to the people side of things, where people would see what maybe it's senior management, what they're earning, what bonuses they got paid, and there'll be a lot of unhappiness and morale damage done to the organization. Of course, from a reputation point of view, we know that the press is very, very quick to jump on anything cyber related nowadays, and then they would be quick to publish a lot of articles. People would have to go for interviews from the organization. Social media would start getting very, very hostile. And then, of course, from a legal point of view, this is a breach in terms of, very sensitive personal information that's been shared. It could result in CCMA cases, maybe even a class action lawsuit where a lawyer gets behind a group of employees to take on the company. All right, so that's an example of potential area that can go wrong there. And it depends on the other areas as well. So breach of sensitive information would result in that. This crime attack would result in business interruption, financial impacts. Key stakeholders would be impacted. The reputation of the organization would be questioned. What kind of security do you have in place? How can you let this happen? And we know, of course, whenever there's an incident, there's your direct costs, financial costs, maybe systems are down, etc. But you have a whole lot of indirect costs as well, which can end up resulting in a lot of additional costs spent in fixing up what happened, cleaning up the mess, so to say, loss of intellectual property, even stuff where sensitive personal information is shared, where that is used by fraudsters to commit identity theft, etc. All right. So these are, we look at three sort of worst case scenarios that we can look at. And then based on that, we can then actually go back and we look at, so where is this sensitive information actually sitting in the organization? Who's got access to it, et cetera, et cetera. And you actually unpack those elements and you look at more detail behind that, and so that you can actually look at addressing those weaknesses where this can potentially happen. And you put in place more controls to actually tighten up your prevention, detection, your incident response, for example, can work on a playbook that deals with a social media outbreak. And then, of course, things such as your recovery in terms of disaster recovery, business continuity, for example, in the case of ransomware, to be able to restore your data on the last clean backup that you had. All right. So this is very good to get people to understand the risk that is out there, and it's something that can get done quite quickly. Then based on the risk tolerance level of an organization, and roughly we use three different types of those. You get those with a low tolerance. So this is typically very, very highly regulated industries, finance, healthcare, telecom, where there's a very strong requirement on security, multiple operations, even overseas operations, a very strong dependence on technology. So they can't afford, things going wrong in this environment. To a company that maybe has a high tolerance, they are maybe more, entrepreneur focused, and they're willing to take a lot more risks. They've got a low dependence on technology. They can move to manual processes. So it all depends on where your organization sits. That's going to depend on answering these questions over here. When an executive asks, are we secure enough so we're not on the front page of News 24, or, how much do you actually have to spend? What input, in terms of resources and time and effort should we be using to manage these risks? So it depends on your organization's tolerance to risk. If this is you, of course, you have to do a lot more. So in terms of how much effort should you be playing or adopting, here's where the rapid health check element comes in, because that will determine the key building blocks of what you need to have in place. All right. And here, for example, is that framework that I was talking to you about earlier, and I'm very happy to share the slides with people in the audience, so you can actually get the relevant context of this. It's basically broken up into governance, all right, and then it's broken up into more your operational components. So this is really a dashboard. Anyone that is trying to manage information risk, these are the key blocks of what you should be having in place and what you should be monitoring on an ongoing basis, and making sure that these elements are taken care of. And what I have done now, just based on experience in the companies that we've dealt with over the last 10 years, is to look at what are the high priority things, stuff that needs to be done immediately. And this is typically at a mid-level company. So this is typically at a medium tolerance type company. Okay, so obviously what I'm going to say might not necessarily apply to a company that is very, very strict or has massive security considerations. All right, so it's more a general sort of middle of the line approach. So what is a high priority is, number one, to make sure that that strategy and goals alignment element is done, that security information risk is actually properly aligned to support those goals and the strategy of the organization. Key policy, key standards in place, that you are doing from a human change management point of view, training and awareness, that is critical, not negotiable. It's not negotiable to not remediate audit findings. It's not negotiable to not be compliant to the laws of the land or the regulations as per your sector. All right, that's mandatory. In terms of focus and attention, all right, physical and environment security, and of course, security of your key operating environment, if you are a manufacturing company, is of course very, very critical. Your infrastructure security, and I've got a slide on unpacking this, in one slide to show important areas that you need to focus on from a perimeter, a network. Actually, out of all of these, I would say, for the endpoint is actually becoming the most critical area now, as our information and data is sitting all over the show. Core applications that you have need to be secured. And of course, when we move down, at the end of the day, very much linked to endpoint is the actual data that's sitting on various devices or that is being processed. All right. You'll see I have left these out for now because these are more important to get going. By default, a lot of the big name, and of course, I'm not saying go out and use just any no-name cloud service out there, but a lot of the big name cloud providers like the Azures and the Amazons of the world actually have very, very good security in place by default. But of course, you need to make sure that you are implementing it on your side and activating the necessary security components. Another good example is your Office 365 components. There's a lot of good security built in, but from experience, when we've helped with incidents, a lot of the good security and the logging, for example, has not been activated. You have to do HR security, all right? So this is your screening and all of those sort of things around providing of assets. And then these are typically your outer environments, your hygiene areas around patch management and change management, having a proper service desk in place for the uptime of the organization. From a detection point of view, it's critical, folks, please. This log and event management, every single time we go in to help with an incident, this is not in place, and it makes our life very, very hard to try and find out what happened, and it just makes that attribution element so much more difficult to try and prove. And if this had been on and being monitored, a lot of notifications would have been sent to the actual security team that something suspicious is going on. Also, you need to have a basic incident management capability in place, an incident response team, and high-level playbooks, procedures to follow. Remember, based on those 3 scenarios that I gave you, if those are high impact, high probability things, plan for them, all right? And then, of course, your backup and recovery element is critical as well. So this is a good starting point from a, get that done first. Then from a second point of that, get your executive engagement and reporting done so that you're having regular communications with the business areas, with all your other teams, such as HR and physical security, etc. Increasingly, we're seeing brand and social media, especially social media companies being, slated or lot of damage done to the organization on social media. You need to have your policy and your plans in place and some kind of monitoring in place there to manage your organization's brand. You need to make sure that the information risk element is properly integrated and linked to your enterprise and operational risk areas as well. All right. We see quite a low level integration typically with, only a few high level IT risks, for example, as opposed to a more deeper risk discussion. Identity and access management, vulnerability and threat management, cloud third party. Cryptography management is really around looking at all the different types of data, data at rest, data in transit, your certificates on your sites, your email, just to make sure that the necessary, your laptops are encrypted, for example, very, very important. And then, of course, business resilience. Once you've got this working, the overall business resilience, crisis management, and then putting in place metrics and reporting, because this is important in terms of reporting that upwards and to your peers in the organization that are there to help you. Remember, I'm going to hop on the issue about this is teamwork. You need your other departments that also have a role to play in helping you sort out this thing. And then the last thing is the stuff that you can move to, at a later stage, innovation and threat intelligence, from a program management, having the right projects in place, and of course, budgeting, to start looking a lot more carefully at how money is being spent in this space. Security architecture is a very, very good value add, but it requires quite a bit of discipline and work. E-discovery and forensics. Typically, most companies have service providers that they would use in this space. And then, of course, having this annual review and improvement in place. So I hope this provides good perspective in terms of, what a company can actually do. You can then use this in terms of doing a gap analysis in your environment to look at and be honest about it. What is not in place? Where are you doing things at a very, very reactive time? Maybe for an audit finding, you quickly slap something together, or this policy or this approach is 5 years old, it's full of dust. Where something is partially in place, you basically meeting the basic information risk requirements, and where something is optimal, where you feel that you've got a handle on things, you've made an investment in training people, there's processes that do seem to be working, and systems are running in the background to assist you. All right, so this is something that gets done in that 1.5 hour session discussion as well. What I said to you earlier, this is a sort of a deeper view of your infrastructure security. So a lot of companies have got outsourced their IT or co-sourced it to various, some of the larger service providers out there. And then when you ask them, who implemented this, they implemented this. Who's checking the security? No, they check the security. You can't have that. You can't have the auditor consulting to you, so to say. So there often needs to be an independent review of these different types of security, that the stuff's been implemented properly, that it is reporting, creating logs properly, it's been hardened, unnecessary port services have been switched off. You look at things like a firewall, for example, where it gets implemented with very good security, but over time, more and more ports just get opened up. Oftentimes you go into a company and the all rule has been implemented. Everything is open. It's basically just it's like it's having a house with no walls. You can just walk straight into it. And then important, don't forget about the personal or what we call the hygiene issues in an organization. So what are some of the issues when you're talking to the team around the table that you're facing? Maybe they're not having proper discussions with Exco. There are some budget challenges, and that often is a result of business not understanding the risk, or not understanding what it means from a business point of view. Maybe there's no proper program in place. There's a lot of, we see this happening all the time with, when the reporting takes days and days using Excel and PowerPoint, and it really is, there's far better ways of actually speeding that up through dashboarding and things like that. Not realizing the value and the benefits. And then, of course, from a technical point of view, when an audit sometimes gets done and stuff is highlighted as a risk, by doing one or two small little things, then that risk gets ticked off as as being managed, and it's not actually the case. And people know that in the back of their minds. So these are some of the things where you need to do a deeper look at things. And then, of course, your normal operational challenges, stuff is not documented, and People are just so busy, awareness uptake is low, you don't have a solid incident response team, you're not confident that your recovery side of things is being managed properly. All right, and we know in terms of executing on the strategy and that execution gap over there, it does result in a lot of these challenges. You know, also then factor in what are some of the audit findings that have been sitting there that needs to be addressed. What are some of the items sitting on the risk register, for example? What are the burning compliance challenges? Where has there been an incident in the last 3 years, or a near miss for that matter? And these are all things that can get factored into what needs to get done. So remember, we've done the impact review, where we looked at those 3 concerns. There's action items there. We've looked at the gap analysis against the information risk framework. There's action items there. There's a number of action items over here as well. So consolidating all of these things into a list, all right? And with the team working out, you know, what is the priority, what needs to be first on the lists, and, you know, Joe in HR, these are your 3 items that you're going to be helping me with, and from an operational point of view, and Tabo in marketing, these are your 6 items, for example, and basically consolidating that list. And please don't forget, apart from what's on that list, you know, you've got to think about the stuff which is expected of you. All businesses, organizations are expected to do these things. They're expected to comply to relevant GRC requirements, privacy, best practice. You know, there's policies that you have to be compliant to, or service level agreements with key partners. There's customer obligations. You know, they give us the information very, very strongly in the privacy side of things. So these are expected. Make sure these factors are considered as well. So once you've got that view of all these different requirements coming down from the various areas, and you've broken it up into the different components, you know, you then want to shake the jar, so to say, so that things become a lot more compact and consolidated, and we've got clear understanding of what are the key initiatives or projects that we need to do, and who's going to be assisting with that. All right. In terms of prioritizing it, we broke it up into 4 key areas: your must-haves, which is critical and urgent, and then your should-have, so it's high. We're going to try and include it in the first pass, and then your nice-to-haves and stuff that you're aware of, but not now. These critical, urgent things get put into the sort of the ambulance swim lane that need to get addressed ASAP. You can't wait for the long-term. You know, these other things get put into and prioritized into a proper program that needs to get addressed. Okay, you don't sometimes have the luxury of 3 months, 6 months to wait for this whole thing to be properly established. These need to get dealt with ASAP. All right, and then just in terms of all of these components fit into a properly thought out plan and strategy that is very much aligned to the goals and objectives of the organizations. And of course, that quick 1.5 hour session is not going to give you all this information. It's going to start you on the right journey to engage with the right senior stakeholders and business stakeholders to get deeper conversations. All right. And of course, that gets put out into a transformation program. Folks, that is my session for today. It would be good if there are any questions or components I could answer. I'd be happy to do so. Thank you.
Wow, much appreciated. Thank you so much, Craig. Do we have any questions, colleagues, for Craig? That was a mouthful. That was a lot. And what I've taken from you is that really it is a team effort. I think, Rox, we may need to really empower ourselves in really being able to collaborate more, because that is coming up more and more in our presentations. We need to have those skills, those soft skills, to be able to collaborate with our partners. But even before I summarize the whole session, colleagues, do we have some questions? It doesn't look like we have, but it was a very interesting presentation, Craig. I think we are also pressed with time because it was the last one, but it is a very interesting points that that we really received from you. So thank you so much for your time. It's always a pleasure, and it's good for you to come and really be with us this morning to share your knowledge and your profession with us. We've gained a lot, we've learned a lot. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, then colleagues, in wrapping up the session, we had this morning Guy Rich, who had taken his time to give us both the letter and spirit of the POPI Act. I'm sure all of us, we've really learned a lot from that, because we need to know where our information is, how do we secure that information, as well as the implications of acting or not acting. So we need to take note of that. And then Junaid went further to tell us that we have technology then that we can use to secure this information. However, in as much as it presents all of those opportunities and enables our environment, there are attacks and the threats that we need to be managing whilst we are doing that. Craig took that further to give us implementation tools in terms of your impact reviews that we need to be doing, gap analysis, as well as differentiating between the various impacts that our different stakeholders that we are serving may suffer from our action or absence of those actions in terms of managing those attacks and the threats that we have, to make sure that our environment is secured. The fact that we can't do that alone, it's teamwork, the segregation of duties that is really required in order to secure or even affirm that the information is secured. So all is left, and not only end there, as Gillian in her opening remarks mentioned, the theme for this year is that as we keep on sharing this information, empowering ourselves, we really need to take it after processing. We step up because the time is now. We make sure that it happens so that we need organizations that are resilient and then that get to gain value for their existence. Colleagues, I think that was all from my side, but I know we have a poll or 4 polls that we need to be running. I am not so sure how to approach that. I need some assistance from you, Rox. Oh, they are running already. Oh, okay. Colleagues, if we can just participate from the polls, it would be very much appreciated. I know we are pressed for time. Thank you so much for gracing us with your presence as well. It's always an honor. Hopefully that you've learned a lot and you are able to take that further as we grow in the risk management profession. Thank you.